Hello, and thank you for joining me for part 2 of my personal budgeting series, Expense Recording and Tracking. As you can see, part 2 is the second in a 7-part series that covers the subject of personal budgeting. And before I get into the substance of part 2, I want to point out a couple of things. First, I want to reiterate that keeping a record of your actual expenditures is the essential starting point in personal budgeting. And in fact, if you don't do this, I really wonder how you could really have an effective personal budgeting system. And all we're talking about here is capturing the actuals. And actuals are simply the expenditures that you have a receipt or a record of. And that's readily available in the form of receipts, credit card statements, bank records, online and mobile payment records. By tracking, I'm talking about keeping a record of your actual expenses over a 12-month period. And I like to use a calendar year because that coincides with my budget time frame. And now I'm going to show you how to get a copy of the Excel spreadsheet and how I use it. So to get a copy of the expense recording and tracking Excel spreadsheet, go to retirementjourneys.com, hover over resources, click on downloads, and you'll be presented with this download option. Click on the text in blue that says downloads, and within a matter of a couple seconds you should receive your copy of the Excel spreadsheet. It's a relatively small file. And now after you've opened up the file, here's what you're going to see. You're going to see a spreadsheet that has 3 workbooks: Summary, Details, and History and Trending. On the Summary page, across row 1 are all of the expense categories. Down column A are the months in the year, and in this case 2015. Over here in column P are the monthly totals for the expenses across the month. And down here in cell P15 is a total of your actual expenditures year to date. And eventually in row 17 you'll be able to have a percentage of each category's representation of the total, so you'll be able to see where you're spending the most money. Moving on to details, this is where you actually post all of your data. And I want to point out before I show you some examples that, as I said, your categories will definitely be different than mine. And when you do modify these columns, just be sure that you go back and keep the 2 workbooks in sync. So let's look at a couple of quick examples as to how the posting process works. So I'm going to work in this column C, gasoline and auto, and put a couple of numbers in here, and go over here in the food column and put some numbers in here, and over here in one of my favorite columns, Costco. I love to shop at Costco. And I tend to enter this data on Saturday mornings when it's kind of quiet around here, and I just recommend that you establish a consistent process or system during which you take the time to enter your actual data. Don't let it overwhelm you. I also like to enter a comment about each expense just to have some additional detail about these expenditures, and they're good from a historical standpoint, especially after you start getting several years worth of this data. It's an easy way to keep records. Go back to the summary page now, and you'll see that the amounts that I've entered equal $306, and you see these percentages that those categories represent of the total. One of the neat things about this spreadsheet is that it's really easy to reuse it year in, year out. You go in and delete all of the data, and voila, you're back. You just rename the spreadsheet, for the current year, whatever it is, and you should be good to go. Now in the History and Trending tab, this is a place where you start to keep track of your expenses over time, and you can actually get a record and see a trend of how things are going. And it's not something you have to do, but I like to have this sort of visual representation again, since I have a large number of years, I can see the history over time. So if I haven't mentioned it already, the summary spreadsheet is integrated with my budget spreadsheet, and I'll show you how that works when we get into part 3 of the personal budgeting. So that wraps up part 2. Thank you very much for watching. If you wish, you can send any questions or comments using the comment form on retirementjourneys.com, and stay tuned for part 3 of the personal budgeting series to follow. Thank you.